On a quiet afternoon in a suburban park, gentle sunlight filtered through the leaves of the trees. On a bench near the playground, an elderly man sat silently, engrossed in reading an old war book. He wore a simple shirt, faded jeans, and a frayed baseball cap. His hands deftly turned the pages, reflecting the patience of someone who had weathered many life experiences. His eyes, though shaded by the cap, exuded a sense of as if nothing in the outside world could disturb his peace. In the distance, the tranquility was disrupted by a group of teenagers gathered near the playground. Their loud laughter echoed through the air, lacking the purity of youthful innocence. Instead, it carried a mocking tone, full of the intent to provoke. This was a group of 4 boys who often came together to find fun by teasing and bullying those they considered weaker. Every time they met, they concocted new pranks to assert their sense of superiority. Today, their gaze landed on the elderly man sitting on the bench. Ryan, the oldest of the group and often the ringleader of their cruel jokes, was the first to notice him. Ryan was a tall boy who carried himself with an air of confidence and arrogance. Smirking, he pointed toward the man and said, "Look at that old man over there. He probably doesn't even know what he's doing." The group burst into laughter and began walking toward him. Another boy added mockingly, "Hey old man, what are you reading? Or are you just pretending to know how to read?" The mocking laughter grew louder as the group moved closer to the man. Their smug steps quickly surrounded the bench, forming a circle. Ryan leaned in, his voice laced with provocation. "Hey old man, what are you reading?" The man remained in the same position, his eyes fixed on the book. He didn't respond or show any sign of acknowledging their presence. His hands continued to turn the pages slowly, as if their words were nothing more than the whisper of the wind. The man's indifference only made the teenagers angrier. Lime stepped forward, holding a water bottle. Smirking, he deliberately poured water near the man's feet and sneered. "Aren't you going to pick it up? Or do you think you were too special for us? Do you think this place is meant for people like you?" Finally, the man raised his head. His gaze met Liam's directly, not with anger, but with an unyielding firmness and quiet authority. He bent down, picked up the bottle, placed it neatly to the side, and returned to his book without uttering a single word. His calm action almost like a silent challenge, only made more furious. Feeling the need to assert himself in front of his friends, Ryan stepped forward, reaching out to grab the book from the man's hands. But before he could touch it, the man stood up abruptly, faster than Ryan could react. "That's enough," the man said, his voice low yet powerful, each word resonating like a warning. The tall man's commanding presence made all 4 boys look up at him. However, their arrogance hadn't entirely faded. Ryan grabbed a water bottle and splashed it toward the man's face. "Get lost, you filthy old man." With that, the 4 boys ran off, their laughter echoing behind them as if they had won some sort of victory. The man showed no anger, nor did he chase after the group of boys. He simply sat back down, picked up his book, and continued reading as though their presence had never affected him. Perhaps this wasn't the first time something like this had happened to him. The next day, a fresh morning enveloped the school. Early sunlight streamed through the classroom windows, casting a warm glow of the neatly arranged desks and chairs. The bell rang, signaling the start of the school day, and the bustling hallways gradually quieted as students filed into their classrooms. As usual, Ryan and his friends gathered in the back row, huddled together and whispering among themselves. They were talking about the events of the previous day at the park, occasionally bursting into smug chuckles. Ryan, still carrying his air of arrogance, recounted the details of his actions as if they were some grand achievement. The group laughed, but their smugness didn't last long. The classroom door opened, and the new teacher walked in. The sight of the man standing at the front of the room instantly silenced all conversation. It was the man from the park. Ryan felt his heart skip a beat. His eyes widened and he stared at the man, unable to blink. His friends looked equally unsettled, their earlier confidence now replaced with visible unease. Liam tried to whisper something but couldn't form the words. The man placed his briefcase on the teacher's desk, removed the familiar baseball cap, and revealed a face that was both kind and marked by experience. He smiled a gentle smile, yet one that carried weight, as if he could see right through every student in the room. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice warm and resonant, filling the room. "My name is Harris, and I will be your new ethics and sociology teacher this semester. I look forward to working with all of you." The classroom fell into silence. All eyes turned toward Mr. Harris, filled with a mix of curiosity and confusion. However, the eyes of Ryan and his friends in the back row were different. They reflected a combination of nervousness and embarrassment. Harris walked slowly toward the podium, his demeanor calm and composed, perfectly matching his character. His gaze swept over the students, taking in every detail. When his eyes rested on Ryan and his friends, the group froze. But contrary to their fears, Harris simply smiled, a smile that left Ryan unsure whether to feel relieved or even more unsettled. That day's lesson was unlike any they had experienced before. Harris didn't directly mention the incident at the park, but his lecture felt as though it had been crafted specifically for Ryan and his friends. It was a lesson about respect, compassion, and the value of treating others with kindness. He shared real-life stories and vivid examples of the consequences of arrogance and selfishness, captivating the entire class. Ryan, who was usually restless and disruptive during lessons, sat in silence for the first time. Every word Harris spoke felt like a direct reminder of his actions the previous day. Harris' gaze, though devoid of reprimand, made Ryan feel a growing sense of guilt stirring within him. A few days later, Mr. Harris decided to do something to reinforce the lesson on empathy he had shared with the class. Instead of teaching in the usual classroom setting, he led the students to a wide-open space under the shade of a large tree. The tranquil and refreshing atmosphere created a sense of intimacy, making it easier for the students to open up. "Class," Mr. Harris began, his voice warm and steady. "Today we won't be learning from textbooks but from your own stories. Each of you will share a time when you were hurt or misunderstood by someone else. This is an opportunity for you to understand the feelings of those who have been harmed by the actions or words of others." At first, no one volunteered. The silence lingered for a few moments until a shy girl hesitantly raised her hand. She shared about a time when her friends mocked her for wearing a dress her mother had sewn from old fabric. Her voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes brimming with tears. The classmates around her began to feel regretful for having contributed to her pain. One by one, other students also opened up, sharing stories filled with hidden pain and vulnerability that no one had expected. When it was Ryan's turn, he hesitated but eventually shared a time when his former friends mocked him for his awkward gait and height. The class fell silent as he spoke, and for the first time, Ryan understood the feelings of those he himself had bullied. Harris listened intently, never interrupting, and then nodded. "How did that feel, Ryan?" "Yeah. Hurtful and humiliating," Ryan replied quietly. Harris looked at the entire class, his voice slow and deliberate. "That is exactly what others feel when you treat them with disrespect. Remember, strength is not the ability to hurt someone, but the choice not to hurt them even when you can." Those words, combined with Ryan's experience, completely changed the attitude of the group of teenagers. They began to view Mr. Harris with a newfound respect, not just as a teacher but as someone who had taught them profound lessons in humility and compassion. Mr. Harris was more than just a regular teacher. He was an inspiration, a symbol of patience and empathy. His life, shaped by the challenges of his youth, the discrimination he had faced, and his unwavering dedication to education, made him a remarkable figure in the eyes of his students. However, one day as Mr. Harris was preparing his lesson as usual, the principal entered the classroom with a serious expression. "Mr. Harris, I need to see you after class," she said in a steady but meaningful tone. After the students left, Harris entered the principal's office, sensing the tension in the air. The principal sat upright, her hands clasped on the desk. "Harris, I know you are an excellent teacher, but there have been some complaints from parents about your teaching methods." Harris furrowed his brow, trying to remain calm. "Complaints about what, Principal?" "Some parents feel that you interfere too much in the personal lives of students." that you were not just teaching them knowledge but also preaching to them. They believe you reimposing your personal views, she explained. Harris remained silent. He understood that not everyone appreciated his approach. Yet he firmly believed that education was not just about imparting knowledge but also about shaping character. "Thank you for sharing this with me," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "However, I want to change the way I teach. Because I don't just want my students to excel academically. I want them to become good people." Many parents wrote letters requesting that Mr. Harris leave the school. Some felt that his teaching methods were inappropriate. Despite the love and admiration of his students, the growing pressure from parents became too much. In the end, to avoid affecting the school's reputation, Harris decided to resign. However, before leaving, he wanted to leave one final gift for his students, something he believed would transcend both time and distance. On the final afternoon before his departure, Harris gathered all his students under the large tree in the schoolyard, the same spot where he had once taught them the lesson on empathy. The soft sunlight filtered through the leaves, and a gentle breeze swept by, creating an atmosphere that was both solemn and warm. Harris looked around, his affectionate gaze lingering on each face he had come to know so well. Ryan, Jason, Liam, and many other students watched him intently, unaware that this would be their last lesson with him. "Class," Harris began, his voice slow but filled with emotion. "Today I want to be teaching from textbooks. Instead, I want to leave you with something, a lesson that I hope you will carry with you for the rest of your lives." He took a small wooden box from his bag and opened it to reveal a collection of handwritten cards. Harris carefully distributed a card to each student. Inside each of these cards is a message, a reminder I have written personally for each of you. But that's not all. Before I leave, I want each of you to write on your card a promise, a commitment to something you wish to change or preserve within yourselves. The class fell silent. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the breeze. The students carefully opened their cards, reading the words Mr. Harris had written. Some couldn't hold back their tears as they saw the thoughtful encouragement and deep understanding he had given them. Ryan, after reading his card, looked up at Mr. Harris, his voice breaking. "You know us better than we know ourselves. I don't want you to leave." Harris smiled, his eyes sparkling yet calm. "Ryan, I'm not truly leaving you. The lessons I've taught and the things I've shared will always remain in your hearts." After all the students had written their promises on their cards, Harris gathered them and placed them in a larger wooden box. He set the box at the base of the tree, then used a small shovel to dig a shallow hole and carefully buried it. "This box will stay here, under this tree, as a reminder of the promises you made to yourselves. One day when you return, dig it up and ask yourselves if you've lived up to those promises." As the lesson ended, the students approached him one by one to say goodbye. Some hugged him quietly, while others sobbed openly. Ryan and his friend, who had once been troublemakers, now stood solemnly in front of him. Mr. Harris said, his voice filled with emotion, "We will never forget what you've taught us. You've changed our lives." Harris placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder and nodded gently. "You've changed yourselves. I only helped you see your true selves." The next day, Harris left the school, carrying his old briefcase and wearing his kind smile. He didn't look back, but in his heart, he knew the values he had instilled would continue to grow. His students watched him leave with tearful, regretful. Harris, however, leaving wasn't an end, it was the beginning of a new journey for the children he had taught for so long. Years later, when the students had grown into adults, they returned to the old school. Now a successful man, accompanied by Jason and Liam, made their way to the large tree. They dug up the wooden box, opened it and read the cards inside. Ryan held his card where Harris had written, "Ryan, the strongest person is not the one who speaks the loudest, but the one who is humble and kind. Always remember that." Suddenly, a soft sound came from behind them, the tap of a wooden cane against the ground. They all turned around. Under the sunlight, the familiar figure of Mr. Harris appeared. His hair was whiter than before, and he held a simple wooden cane, posture still calm and composed. his eyes shining as brightly as ever. A kind smile spread across his face. "Well," Harris said in his warm, deep voice that seemed unchanged by time, "I didn't think I'd see you all here today." For a few moments they were frozen, then a spark of emotion lit up in each of them. They rushed toward Harris, surrounding him, unable to hide their joy and emotion. "Mr. Harris," Ryan exclaimed, his eyes welling with tears. "How are you? How did you know we'd be here?" Harris leaned on his cane, walking closer at a measured pace. "A little bird whispered it to me," he said half-jokingly, making the group laugh. Jason, unable to hold back his feelings, said, "You're not just our teacher, Mr. Harris. You're the greatest inspiration in our lives." Harris smiled, his affectionate gaze sweeping over the familiar faces he had once known. "You," he said warmly, "are the ones who have written your own stories. I simply played a small role in pointing the way." They sat together under the large tree, reading the cards and sharing updates about their current lives. Laughter rang out, dissolving the barriers of time. Harris sat quietly observing his former students, his heart swelling with pride and happiness. Under the afternoon sunlight, the great tree stood as a steadfast symbol of the moral values Harris had nurtured. And as they parted ways, each carried a warm feeling in their hearts. Harris' unexpected return was not just a gift, but a reminder that no matter where they were or what time it was, kindness and the lessons of life would always connect them.